Okay, thank you, everyone. Tonight we're going to cover the 2020 LWC Project Annual Report, and Jean-Paul Zagarola, Project Manager with Bonneville Environmental Foundation, and Aubrey Cloud, Assistant Project Manager with the Luckiamute Watershed Council, are going to give us this overview. Thank you, JP.
Thanks, Kristen, and thank you all for attending this presentation. As Kristen mentioned, I'm going to be discussing our 2020 projects and projects that we're planning for 2021. And I just wanted to give out a special thank you to Aubrey Cloud for not only assisting me with this presentation, but assisting me with all the projects that we have going on in the Luckiamute this year or last year and this year. So despite all the challenges of 2020, it was a fairly positive and productive year for the Luckiamute Watershed Council. You can see we're pretty active, kind of highlighted by all these different colors here. So for this presentation, I'm just going to discuss the projects that we implemented in 2020, those that were stewarded in 2020. That's going to be Aubrey's piece, and then the projects that we're developing that are in planning and that we plan to implement in 2021. So like I said, we did a lot of work in 2020. I'm just going to highlight a few of the projects here, but you can see here on the box on the right all the accomplishments. But for this, I'll just be discussing the Upper Ritner Creek project that's sort of in the upper model watershed or upper reaches of the watershed. The J2E River to Ridge Diversity Project down here in the south, and then the LSNA Floodplain Reconnection and Revegetation Project, which is down here at the mouth with the confluence of the Luckiamute and Willamette here down in the eastern end of the map. Okay, Luckiamute State Natural Area Floodplain Reconnection Reforestation. As most of you know, this really is the shining star for the Luckiamute. We've been working here for over 10 years. This particular phase 4, sort of been in the planning stage for over 10 years. And we made significant progress over the summer in just completing our overall objectives for this project, which essentially were to increase flooding extent and duration under sort of normal flood years. This year, everything's kind of flooded, as Scott can tell you, but that is highly beneficial to rearing steelhead and chinook on their way out to the ocean. Yeah, so I'll just kind of zoom through a couple of photos here. So we worked with Trask Design and Construction to move a lot of earth, really in about 8 acres, 6 to 8 acres on the site. And we were really just, I'm gonna move my mouse here, connecting some of these existing floodplain features and creating some channels and areas so that the site could flood more frequently on an annual basis. That was completed. It took probably 2.5 weeks. It was probably about 2 weeks faster than what we expected. We went in and did, we engaged a bunch of volunteers to do some seeding and lay down some straw to help stabilize the soils and just get some vegetation going into the ground before we got any significant flooding. This is a photo here of some of our volunteers throwing straw down. In addition, we just recently completed about, let's see, a little over 9,000 willow, spirea, and a number of other plants, cuttings, live cuttings that we had harvested from the site, installed those with our revegetation contractor, Diego Franco Contracting. And so we actually got that in right before, probably about a week before that first flood. thankfully, those stakes will kind of help slow down that water velocity a little bit, provide some immediate velocity refugia for any salmon or steelhead that are getting up out on the floodplain, and help stabilize those soils a little bit. And here are just a few photos from some of the flooding that we've seen. OPRD's been sending out a drone to capture some of these images, which are really great. And the project's working as it should. This was one of the can you see my mouse?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So this was one of the main breaches here. You can see that's where most of the water is coming in, and it's essentially just following our project here. We excavated all this and over out in this direction, so on and so forth. So great to see. We're getting ready to install about 60,000 plants in the surrounding floodplain here. We were planning to do that on Monday, but I kind of doubt all the flooding will have receded by then, and plus we don't have all the plants ready. So that it'll probably be another week and a half or so before we do that. And then we're just moving into plant establishment phase over the next 5 years, trying to get those plants free to grow. All right, moving on to the J2E River to Ridge Diversity Project. This is upstream on Vincent Creek, which is a tributary to the Luckiamute. Like the name states here, there's a lot of diverse species and habitats going on at the property. This is Dave and Sarah Ayler's property, and Dave's really been kind of leading the activities on the ground here, and I've really sort of stepped back and taken more of providing more of a consulting role, I'd say, here. And Dave's just been doing a great job kind of carrying things forward on the ground. So just to name some of the habitats, we have wet prairie, there's like an oaky butterfly corridor, there's forested wetland, riparian, in-stream habitat, and more upland oak and conifer forest and hardwood forest. So there's really a lot going on there. It's really a special site. One of the target species is that we're enhancing habitat for is checker spot butterfly, which is a pretty unique butterfly that's pretty limited in range, but is found nearby. And so hopefully we can do some work to attract checker spot butterfly to the property eventually. So over the summer, we conducted a couple surveys with ODF&W and Xerxes Society. That turned up 2 species of mussels, one that's pretty rare for the area, including several juveniles, which is a good indication that those mussel beds are reproducing, which again is pretty rare. A lot of mussels and mussel beds are on the decline right now. In addition, there were 7 species of fish found in those surveys. Again, pretty impressive diversity. And again, with Trask Construction Design, we installed, I believe it was 12 log structures in Vincent Creek to kind of help raise the elevation of the stream bed there and just improve complexity of the channel. There's still a lot of work to do. We're kind of plowing through some permitting right now, and we're prepping much of the habitat for planting probably about a year from now. Yeah. Okay, moving on to Upper Ritner Creek Splashdam Recovery Project. This one's not too far from Vincent Creek. This is one I presented on before. We installed, I believe it was 28 log structures on Ritner Creek in 2018. And then at the lower end of that reach, yep, somebody there? Okay. Yeah, at the lower end of the reach, there's an interesting 2.5 acre patch of canary grass that looked like potentially could have been old beaver pond that had blown out at some point. We contracted our fish biologist, Steve Trask, to go out there and do some of the log placement design. And he sort of confirmed that that seems to be the case. And so we've essentially just been controlling that recanary grass there for the last 2 years. And I'm actually seeing a ton of beaver activity there now, I think because they can kind of navigate around this area a lot better. And those log structures, which are kind of right by this lower end of the reach, sort of help slow down the creek a little bit, create some more pool habitat, makes it easier for beaver to build dams. So that's super exciting. And we just installed with Kuznetsov Thinning Company, they're the contractor. We installed a little over 3,000 willow cuttings, beaver food essentially. And we're just kind of waiting to see how that responds. I'm anxious to get back out there and see how many of our stakes beavers have ripped out and started chewing on and used in their dams, or just started chewing on because their dams have probably been blown out and all their food's gone. So we'll follow up with more planting if we need to, and then we're just going to continue to do some maintenance to make sure those willows get established eventually. Okay, projects under stewardship. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Aubrey here. Aubrey, if you just want to let me know when to switch to the next slide, I can do that for you.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, JP. Unfortunately, we don't have time to go over all 641 acres spread over 40 project sites of restoration that the Luckiamute is currently stewarding. So to give you kind of a sample, representative sample, we're going to zoom in on a couple of these projects. Both of them are contained in the model watershed focus area. On the map there, it's delineated by the dotted lines in the kind of west end of the watershed. And then there's a focus frame with 2 more projects nested within it, and those are the 2 we're going to talk about. The first is Maxfield Creek. That's one of our newer projects. And this one drains out of the timberlands through kind of a large stretch of Kings Valley until it joins with the Luckiamute main stem right around the Kings Valley Charter School, if you guys are familiar with that region. So this is pretty exciting project that's building on a lot of work that's gone into various parts of Maxfield Creek over the years. It's focused on roughly 26, 28 acres of riparian forest along a nearly 2-mile stretch of the creek. And it's been worked on for a couple years now. Site prep is completed, and we've just wrapped up our 2nd year of planting and plant establishment maintenance. And probably just next week, we are going to, sorry, saw the chat message. Yeah, just next week, we're going to follow up with about 4,800 more plantings, which is an interplanting effort, part of regular kind of procedure of a restoration project. Those add to a total of roughly 21,000 plants that have been installed to date. And overall, survival is looking really good. They're all still young, so they're still not very big, but they're getting there. Going forward, we've got a few more years of kind of PE maintenance and plant establishment work to do. One of the tasks that I'm pretty excited about is we've identified some sections of Maxfield that we're going to use as an experimental plot to test out a new herbicide product new to the council called SureGuard SC. This is a pre-emergent herbicide that other groups like Greenbelt Land Trust have used and had a lot of really encouraging success with. So we are going to test it out and see how it goes. And if we're happy with the results, we can kind of deploy it a little more widely. That I think is Maxfield. JP?
Getting there. It's not switching for some reason. Let's see. There it goes.
Oh, no worries. Okay, so Bush. Bush is actually part of a much larger suite of restoration sites called our model watershed sites. These are all focused on riparian enhancement throughout the upper Luckiamute model watershed area. Bush, however, named for the property owner, is by far the largest one. I think it's larger than all the others combined. It's around 37 acres and follows a couple miles of the main stem Luckiamute, and it catches it right as it does that really pronounced elbow and stops draining south and starts flowing north again, draining out of Hoskins, the suburb, and into Kings Valley. This is a much older project with plants, ton of plants, all about 93,000 native trees and shrubs have gone in here. And as you can see in the picture there, they are really, really getting off to the races. They're almost free to grow, I would say, in most places. There's a couple areas of spotty survival, but in general, it's a really robust site. This one is really special to me because this is the first site I ever worked on in the Luckiamute, my first day as a contractor, and all these plants were smaller than me when I started. So it's been really cool to see them grow over the years. In addition to the plants, we've in the beginning installed about 4 miles of livestock exclusion fencing. That was really critical to keep the cattle, which were being run on the land at the time, out of our re-veg area and protect the plants from being trampled. And it seems to have paid off. The plants are looking great. This project is almost out of funding, and so this coming year will probably be the last year of kind of traditional PE activities. However, the Knotweed program, which I'll talk about in a few slides, captures this within its scope, and so we will be able to continue controlling knotweed on this stretch for years to come.
All right, thank you, Aubrey. Okay, the work ahead. Wendy, I have a feeling this is your favorite slide. In case any of y'all are feeling sentimental about what the LWC office looked like pre-COVID days, this is just a typical day at the office, and I'll let you sort out who's who. Moving on. So the work ahead, it's going to be another busy year this year. I will highlight a couple, and Aubrey's going to jump back in here for Luckiamute Knotweed.
Okay, knotweed. I'm sure most of you are familiar with knotweed. It's incredibly aggressive invasive species. The IUCN calls it one of the 100 worst invaders in the world. And the council recognized the threat that knotweed poses really early on, and the knotweed control program, which has been going for around a decade now, has been really, really effective, and it's an encouraging example of what we can do. The program is focused on the Luckiamute main stem, and at this point, we've gotten about 90% landowner participation. Should clarify, that doesn't mean we've had that for the full 10 years. That's been something we've built up over time and worked to increase. So we haven't been treating every site for 10 years, but in general, we've been active controlling knotweed for that period of time. The program was really successful. There's a great example in the picture there of the Wildwood Bridge up kind of in the upper Luckiamute, where On the left, you can see the big old knotweed patch from 7-8 years ago, and now it's beautiful Pacific 9 bark and blue elderberry. Unfortunately, the funding for the original OWEB grant that paid for this ran out around the end of 2018. But fortunately, we have secured BLM funding, which is going to pay for continuation of this program for a while to come. Another exciting-ish development, depending on your perspective, is we're expanding the scope of the program this year. The unfortunate side of that means that we've discovered knotweed elsewhere in the watershed. The Teal Creek subbasin had some positive ID of knotweed earlier this year, so we're going to roll that into our surveys and treatments this year for a total of up to 87 river and stream miles of effort. But yeah, it's been an effective program, and we'll keep going with it.
Sweet, thanks again, Aubrey.
Thank you.
One thing I wanted to mention is that before Aubrey was hired as assistant project manager, he was working for one of the contractors we were working with to maintain and plant some of the sites. So Aubrey, pre-LWC, has a long history with some of these sites, and I think is probably pretty fond of some of them. So, yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay, moving on. This is protecting the best upper Luckiamute main stem anchor habitat enhancement. So this is on the main stem Luckiamute, kind of way up into timberlands. This area is pretty special in that it's our best steelhead habitat in the watershed. There are several surveys conducted from 2008 to 2011, and just showed that it was getting, I think, somewhere between like 75 to 90% of all of the steelhead in the basin. And if you ever walk this reach, it just looks great. It has all the components that you'd want. It's complex. There's spawning substrate, and there's some wood, and it's actually lacking a little bit of wood and log jams, which you'd like to see, and the log jams that are there are deteriorating. So the purpose of this project is to just kind of maintain this as the anchor for the Luckiamute, and add in that wood component, because if we didn't, then it would revert to a potentially degraded stream, and with just, you know, a degraded quality salmonid habitat. So we had planned to implement this one last summer. It got postponed due to COVID and other scheduling conflicts with our contractor. So we're going to implement this summer through installation of 24 log structures here with the same contractor that we use on some of those other projects I was discussing. Trash design and construction, and we actually did make a little bit of progress in early summer. There's a stand of Doug firs that's virtually like a tree farm stand, very tightly planted, that we went in and thinned, and just to kind of encourage a more natural riparian conifer growth. In addition, we did a little bit of well, I should mention, so the other kind of cool element of this project is this 8-acre wetland here adjacent to the reach. It has a unique species of checker mallow that's never been found in the wild before. It's a hybrid checker mallow. So we're just interested in figuring out what the management should be of this wetland, what actions we should take, and what maybe the long-term management should be. Hancock Timber Resources, who's the landowner, is pretty committed to conserving this area. So we did do a little bit of surveying early on, but we're going to do a full botanical survey with the Institute of Applied Ecology. this spring when all the flowers here are popping. It's really a lovely place with a lot of unique flora in there. And I think this is the last one I'm going to cover. This is the Midland Beaver Partnership. I'm probably most excited about this or these sets of projects and this partnership. The purpose of this partnership is really to promote beaver across the landscape in the Mid-Willamette. We recently proposed 2 projects to do habitat analysis and project prioritization and beaver restoration planning, and do pretty thorough stakeholder engagement that's going to interview different types of landowners, user groups, agencies to better understand what are some of the social barriers to promoting beaver across the landscape. And then after we get funding and implement that, we'll hopefully move into actually doing some restoration. I've got this cool little graphic here. This is really just to show that, so we submitted these 2 OWEB proposals, but those 2 proposals are really just the first step into a much bigger and broader strategy to increase beaver across the landscape and hopefully increase acceptance of sort of cohabitation with beaver. And next steps for that, we're just kind of waiting for the results from OWEB to see how those did. And we're currently kind of looking at some other funding resources to tap to fund these projects, and then hopefully move into implementation fairly soon. And with that, that's it. Thanks, everybody. Kristen, I assume we have time for questions?
Yes, we do.
Cool. I can, well, I guess I'll leave my screen up for now.
So anybody have any questions? We have a lot going on the ground, as you can tell, and that was really just covering the tip of the iceberg there, as the JP and Aubrey mentioned. Gee, Aubrey, I didn't realize that you had 641 acres to roll around in, whatever it is, but that's quite a lot there.
Well, that's a group effort, and a lot of it is LSNA, I think.
You know, and while I think of it, if you are following the council, on January 28th, Kristen and JP are going to make a SIPS and Science Zoom presentation. It is the 28th, isn't it?
Yeah, 2 weeks from tonight.
Yeah, and so you're all invited to attend that free of charge, and they will have a different approach from tonight, I think. So Kristen, do you want to just say a little bit about how it's going to be somewhat different?
Sure. So it will, January, we'll talk about this in a little bit at the end of the agenda, is the 20th anniversary of the council. And so we're going to do sort of an overview of 20 years of restoration. It's not going to be similar to this. We're like, and then we planted those trees, and then we did that project. We won't do that to you. It's going to be more of a highlight of how the council has approached restoration over the years and how that has shifted, the partners we've had involved, and then just example projects over the years. So it will not be a litany of one project after another. It'll be a little more holistic look of how we've evolved over the last 20 years and where we hope to go next.
I think that will be interesting for folks to hear how we decide on which projects we're going to be doing in this watershed, which is by many standards a small watershed, but it feels kind of large to us at times. So yeah, that should be very interesting. So January 28th, please mark your calendars. Any questions from the, yes, George.
So just for JP and Aubrey, probably on the Bush Farm property, what you guys aware of the open up the culvert that they're doing along the road out there? Have you seen that work?
So one of the fields has come under new ownership by the fellow who was leasing it for several years, and They have been pretty active doing a lot of work out there. I haven't seen the culvert specifically that you're mentioning.
They just rolled an excavator down in there a few days ago and started taking the culvert along the road, along the road edge of that property is about
Is that
3 or 4
on,
times bigger than it used to be.
is that on, which road crossing is that?
It's
Yeah.
between Hoskins. It's between Hoskins Road down to the bridge at Bushes.
Oh, okay.
And so there's
it's the main-
a trailer house. There's a house on the corner at Hoskins Road.
Yeah.
Their property starts the culvert starts just beyond that property. So pretty much from there is where they brought the excavator in, and then they're taking the culvert all the way down. All the tree line there, all of the shrub, all the bush and everything, the brush that was there, it's all gone. And it's just an open culvert.
It's
Like we
not the main river.
No, but it's gonna. I'm wondering if that's why I was asking, because they haven't gotten down to that end of the field yet. So I'm wondering if they're going to take that culvert right down into the river, and impacts that would have for anything they happen to put on that field.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, be worth. Is that on the house side? Then that's on the house side. You're saying of the road.
It's on the. It would be on the going towards Dave's property, going towards the river. So it's on. If I'm coming out of my place, it'd be on my right. It'd be my right hand side as I go around the corner and
Okay.
head up to
So
Hoskins.
that's the new landowner.
So it'd be on the left coming down.
Yeah, so they did a lot
Or
of,
like a,
go ahead.
I'm just looking at the aerial photo, so if I'm understanding George right, a little bit of drainage between Jones's property and that property on between Hoskins Road and the river, right? Is that?
It'd be from the river. It'd be from
They
the river
probably-
up to the property up there.
They probably tiled the field,
Yeah.
or improving the tile lines and the drainage of that field, because it did collect quite a bit of water. And
They were in.
We should
sorry,
go
go ahead.
take a look. And-
Aubrey?
Yeah, I agree. And they have installed drainage, and that's the work that I had seen them doing.
Right.
So if that might be what you're talking about, but it's worth another check for sure.
Thank you. Dave, did you have something?
Yeah, so they did a huge land leveling project where they took, a bunch of dirt from the closer to the river and brought it up to the north edge towards the road. There's a huge seep that comes out of that hillside right there, sort of in the middle
Mhm.
of that field. And so what's happening now is it's flooding there, and they don't want any water in there at all. So George, are they putting a culvert between or right along the road ditch that's going to go east?
Yeah, it's right along the road dish running east to west. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's basically that ditch that was there. It sounds like they're putting a culvert up there to drain that water that's coming out of the hillside, and then it's going to go down to the river. So my guess is that most of the water that goes into there is going to be water that's just come out of the ground.
Well, there was a hedgerow. There was a hedgerow there all along that ran down there too, and that hedgerow's all gone.
Well, I think it was all blackberries.
Yeah, mostly.
So I'm not sure it was a hedgerow, but
There was some.
it was a headache.
He had told, when we reached out to them, when he bought the property, about continuing the plant establishment and knotweed control. And so they agreed for 2020, and we'll need to re-recruit access for 2021 to continue. But that his thinking in terms of managing this is filbert orchard, hazelnuts. So that sounds like what they're working towards. Yeah.
Oh, I see. Yeah, he's growing garlic now, it looks like.
Okay, let's move on back to the presentation and just find out if anybody has any comments or questions, concerns about what was presented tonight. I love the photos of Allison A. underwater.
Yeah, I think it's probably even more underwater now based on what Scott's saying.
Mm.
Yeah.
So the volunteer plantings that people helped with, putting straw down a couple months ago, was it now?
No,
So I assume that things did start growing just before floods happened, or can you say a little bit about that?
Well, the grass seed that we put down germinated well, and that was the volunteer work that you, Wendy, participated in, and others, and then the cuttings that we put in was just I guess the second week of December. So those, you know, that'll be a little bit before they start sprouting, hopefully this spring. But yeah, I mean, all the work the volunteers did, it looks great.
Good. Okay, well, not hearing any other questions, I'd like to thank JP and Aubrey, not only for an excellent presentation, but for fantastic work that you're doing out there in the field, and for showing that stupid cartoon one more time.
Last time, Wendy.
I have to say thank you for staying within your very strict time allotment that Wendy and I gave you. And my parents made a sneak presence here. I was scrolling through the tiles and I saw Gary and Kathy, and I was like, wait, I know Gary and Kathy. They're gone now, but my dad's name is Gary Larson. And so my entire childhood, his never-ending birthday and Christmas presents were Gary Larson cartoon books. So
Nice.
You had a fan in the crowd tonight on that.
I'll continue putting them into future presentations.
Okay, thank you. So we'll go ahead and move on to an executive committee discussion that should interest several of our other guests tonight, and that's on